"Come with me." The rich cowboy came to collect her father's debt, but he took her hand instead. The late sun draped the prairie in a molten haze as the man rode in, his shadow stretching long over the dust road that led to the worn cabin at the edge of Dry Creek. His stallion, black and broad-shouldered, moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, and the man's presence carried the weight of purpose. His name was Cole Turner, the kind of name that whispered through saloon doors and left silence behind it. He had money, land, and a reputation sharp enough to draw blood. But today he came not for land or pride. He came for a debt. The old man on the porch straightened when he saw him. Samuel Hale had been waiting for this day. He knew it would come, though he prayed each morning that it never would. He wiped his weathered hands on his trousers, eyes darting to the door where his daughter stood. Anna Hale's heart thudded like thunder trapped beneath her ribs. Her little sister, Lily, clutched her hand, asking in a whisper, "Who was he?" "Trouble," Anna said softly. Cole dismounted, his boots pressing into the earth with the weight of something final. His shirt, sleeveless under the heat, revealed scars like claw marks etched into muscle, reminders of battles fought and survived. But his eyes, steel blue and unreadable, softened when they met Anna's across the distance. For a moment, the air held still between them. Then, business took over. "Samuel Hale," Cole said, his voice low, steady. "You owe me a debt." The old man sighed, his shoulders caving slightly as though under an invisible burden. "I know, son, and I'll pay. Just need a little more time. The harvest's late, the land's dry." Cole's jaw tightened. "You've had time. 2 years of it. I can't keep waiting." Anna stepped forward before her father could answer. "We'll pay you back, somehow." Her voice trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. She was dust-stained, tired, yet there was a fierceness in her that reminded Cole of something he'd lost long ago. Hope, maybe. Or mercy. He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him shifted. "I didn't come to take your home," he said after a pause. "But something must be done." The old man's face tightened in confusion. "What do you mean?" Cole turned slightly toward Anna. "Come with me." The words fell heavy, unexpected, like a spark dropped into dry grass. Anna's breath hitched. "What? I'll clear your father's debt," he said. "If you come with me, to my ranch." For a time, Lily's small fingers clung to Anna's dress, eyes wide with fear. "You can't take her," she cried, her voice thin but fierce. Samuel Hale's face crumpled, guilt and helplessness twisting together. He'd gambled everything. His crops, his savings, his pride, and lost. Anna's throat burned. "And if I refuse?" Cole's expression softened, almost regretful. "Then I take the land. Everything your family owns." The world around her seemed to blur. The wind hissed through the dry grass. She looked at her father, his hands shaking, his eyes hollow. There was no choice. There never had been. She turned to Cole, voice low and steady. "When do we leave?" That night, as the last light died behind the hills, Anna stood outside her home one last time. Lily cried quietly against her dress. Samuel tried to speak, but his words failed. Cole waited by his horse, a silhouette against the horizon. When Anna finally walked to him, she didn't look back. The road was long, the silence between them heavier than the heat. Cole offered her water at the first stop, but she refused. He didn't press. She wasn't a woman used to comfort, and he wasn't a man used to explaining himself. Yet, as the sun dipped lower, he found himself glancing at her more than once, at the dirt-smudged hem of her dress, the stubborn tilt of her chin, the sadness she carried like armor. By the time they reached his ranch, twilight had fallen. The Turner estate stretched wide, a kingdom of fences, barns, and cattle under an endless sky. But for all its wealth, the place felt lonely. Cole led her to a small cabin near the stables. "You can stay here," he said quietly. "You'll be safe." She turned to him. "Safe isn't the same as free." He hesitated. "No, it isn't." Days passed. Anna worked in the gardens, helped in the kitchen, and tended to the horses. Cole watched her sometimes from a distance, drawn to the quiet grace in her movements. She spoke little, but when she did, her words had weight. There was a stubborn pride in her that he both admired and feared. One afternoon, while helping to draw water from the well, her hand slipped on the rope. The bucket plunged, splashing her skirt. Cole was beside her in an instant, steadying her wrist. She froze at his touch, the warmth of his hand, the roughness of his skin. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You don't have to keep me here," she whispered finally. "You've already won. I didn't bring you here to win," he said, voice low. "I brought you because I couldn't walk away." Anna's eyes met his. The truth in them startled her. This wasn't the ruthless cowboy people whispered about. This was a man haunted by something deeper than greed, a man searching for something he didn't understand. That night, when the wind howled across the plains, Anna stood outside her cabin and looked toward the big house on the hill. The windows glowed faintly. She could almost see him there, pacing in the lamplight, restless. She didn't know whether to hate him or pity him. Maybe both. The next morning, Cole found her near the corral, brushing down a horse. "You handle them well," he said. "I grew up with them," she replied softly. "They don't need words to understand fear." He smiled faintly. "Neither do people." Their eyes met again, and for the first time, something passed between them that wasn't about debt or duty. It was fragile, unspoken, a kind of understanding that made the air between them hum. Weeks turned into months. The land greened after the rains. Anna's laughter, rare, soft, began to echo in the halls of Cole's home. He found excuses to be near her, to hear that sound again. She found herself waiting for him at the door each evening, though she'd never admit it. But the world has a cruel way of testing love born from circumstance. One afternoon, Samuel Hale rode up the long road to the Turner Ranch, his old horse barely keeping pace. His face was lined with both gratitude and guilt. "I came to take her home," he said. "The debt's paid, every cent." Anna froze. Her heart thudded. She looked at Cole, his expression unreadable. "Is it true?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "It's true." "Then I can leave." He stepped closer, his voice rough. "You can always leave, Anna. You were never my prisoner." She stared at him, her breath unsteady. "Then why did you ask me to come?" He hesitated. "Because I didn't know how else to keep you near." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind and the creak of the barn doors. She wanted to hate him for it, for taking her choice, for twisting her life into his, but her heart refused. That night, she packed her few belongings. Lily would be waiting, her father smiling again. Freedom lay down that road. Yet as she looked out across the Turner Ranch, the place that had become a strange kind of home, something inside her broke. Cole was on the porch, bottle in hand, eyes lost in the dark. She stepped closer. "You said you brought me here because you couldn't walk away," she murmured. "What about now?" He turned, his face raw in the moonlight. "Now, I'd beg you to stay. But I won't. You deserve your life back." Anna's throat tightened. She reached out, touched his hand. "Just once, light as a promise. And you deserve to find yours." The dawn came pale and cold when she finally rode away. Cole stood watching until the dust settled and the horizon swallowed her. He thought he'd feel relief, but what filled him instead was silence, wide and endless as the plains themselves. Months later, when the wildflowers bloomed across the valley, he saw her again. She came riding down the same road, sunlight catching in her hair. "I brought your horse back," she said softly, dismounting. He smiled faintly, eyes warm with something deeper than surprise. "You didn't have to." "I know," she whispered. "But I wanted to." And when he reached for her hand, this time, she didn't pull away. The air hung between them, trembling with a quiet that said more than either could. The sky was soft with morning, and a thin layer of mist clung to the ground like a secret refusing to lift. Cole's hand lingered in the space between them, steady, waiting. Anna looked at it for a heartbeat that stretched too long, then let her fingers find his. His skin was warm, rough, familiar in a way that made her heart ache. It felt like the end of something, and the beginning of everything else. She didn't know what words could fit this moment, what words could make sense of the road that had brought her back here after so long. But she didn't need to speak, not yet. The silence held, tender and fragile, until Cole finally exhaled the breath he'd been holding since she left. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said quietly. His voice wasn't the one she remembered from the day he took her away from Dry Creek. It wasn't hard, commanding, full of edges. It was gentler now, tempered by time and loss. "I didn't think I'd come back," Anna admitted. But I never really stopped thinking about this place. About you." His gaze dropped for a moment, as though afraid of what he might see in her eyes. "And your family? They're safe," she said. "Father's debts are gone. Lily's growing up." She started reading on her own. The house looks smaller now, though. Quieter. She hesitated, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think I left part of myself here when I went away." Cole swallowed hard, his thumb tracing the edge of her knuckles as if to be sure she was real. "Then I guess it's only fair you came to take it back." A faint smile curved her lips. "Maybe I did." He took her horse's reins and tied them to the post. "You must be tired. Come inside, Anna." She hesitated, her eyes tracing the familiar lines of the ranch house. The porch she'd swept in the mornings, the window she'd looked through countless nights wondering what freedom really meant. The place hadn't changed much, but it felt different. The walls seemed to breathe softer, the ground seemed to remember her steps. When she stepped through the door, a flood of old memories met her. The smell of wood smoke, the low creak of the floorboards, the faint scent of horses and leather. Cole poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, and the spark that had never truly died flickered again. "You've kept the place well," she said, glancing around. "I had to," he replied. "Didn't want it to fall apart. Someone told me once that a home isn't built on walls, it's built on the people who care enough to stay. Guess I've been trying to prove her right." Her lips parted slightly, and she lowered her eyes. "You still remember what I said back then?" He smiled faintly. "I remember every word you ever said." For a moment, neither moved. The sound of the wind brushing against the windows filled the space between them. Later that day, they walked down to the corral, the air thick with the smell of hay and summer dust. The horses shifted restlessly, their tails swishing at the flies. Anna reached for one of them, a chestnut mare she used to feed every morning, and the animal leaned into her touch, recognizing her after all this time. "She missed you," Cole said. Anna smiled. "You mean, you missed me?" He chuckled, low and genuine. "Maybe both." She looked at him, and the teasing light in her eyes softened. "Why didn't you ever come to find me, Cole?" He stopped, his expression clouding over. "Because I thought you deserved peace. You'd spent enough of your life trapped by other people's choices, mine included. I figured if you wanted to come back, you would. And I did," she said quietly. "Not because I had to. Because I wanted to." The words hung in the air like a confession. Cole's chest tightened with something he couldn't quite name, a mix of relief, longing, and fear. "You're not the same girl I brought here that summer," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm not. You taught me how not to be." The afternoon light melted into gold, stretching shadows across the field. Cole fetched a saddle and began tightening the straps on one of the horses. His movements were methodical, but she saw the tremor in his hands, the kind that comes when a man's heart is unsteady but he refuses to show it. "Cole," she said softly, "what's happened since I left?" He paused, glancing out toward the horizon. "The ranch nearly fell apart. I had to sell a third of the cattle during the drought. Lost a few good men to the mines up north. But I kept the land. I couldn't let it go. It was all I had left of." He stopped himself, the rest of the sentence lost somewhere between memory and silence. "Of what?" she asked gently. He looked at her then, his eyes raw. "Of you." She drew in a slow breath, the world seeming to still around them. "You shouldn't have built your life around a memory." "Maybe," he said, stepping closer, his voice low, almost breaking. "But sometimes memories are all a man has to keep him alive." Anna's heart ached for him, for the years he'd spent alone, for the quiet rooms that must have echoed with her absence. She reached out, touching his arm. The muscle beneath her fingers was tense, but when she didn't pull away, she felt him breathe again. They spent the evening together, sitting on the porch as the sky bled into violet and the first stars appeared. She told him about Dry Creek, about her father's health, about Lily's laughter filling the house. He listened, every word a balm to the years he'd carried without her. At one point, she turned to him and said, "Do you ever regret it? Bringing me here that day?" He didn't answer at first. The silence stretched until the crickets filled it. Then he said, "Every night I told myself I should have left you alone. That what I did was selfish. But then I remember the way you looked at me when you said yes, when you chose to come. And I realize, maybe that was the first time in my life something felt right. Anna looked away, blinking against the sting in her eyes. It didn't feel right then, she whispered. But it does now. The moon climbed higher, silver light brushing against their faces. For the first time in years, neither of them felt like running from the past. The following days unfolded gently, like chapters rewritten by softer hands. Anna helped around the ranch again, mending harnesses, tending the garden, feeding the horses before dawn. She found peace in the rhythm of work, in the quiet strength of the land that once felt like her prison but now felt like her anchor. Cole worked beside her, their conversation simple but weighted with the kind of understanding that comes only after pain has been shared and survived. One evening, after a long day under the sun, Cole walked her to the edge of the pasture. The air smelled of rain and warm soil. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and said, "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." Anna's breath caught. "What is it?" He hesitated, his voice low. "Stay. Not because of a debt, not because I asked you once before, but because this place feels whole again when you're here. Because I don't want to wake up another morning without seeing you." Her eyes filled with tears, though her smile trembled through them. "Cole, I mean it," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't owe me anything. You never did. I just want a chance to do it right this time." She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath it. "Then promise me something," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never try to own me again." He looked down at her, eyes fierce and tender all at once. "I promise," he said. "All I want is to walk beside you." And when she rose to kiss him, the world seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't a kiss born of desperation or confusion, like the ones that came before. It was quiet, certain, deep as the roots that ran beneath the prairie soil. It was the kind of kiss that made the years between them dissolve, leaving only what mattered, the truth that they had both been waiting to find. From that night on, everything changed. The ranch seemed to bloom with her presence, as if the earth itself recognized that she belonged there. Cole stopped measuring the days by losses and started living them by moments. Anna began to write letters to Lily, telling her about the sunsets, the horses, the way the wind whispered through the grass. She didn't call it love in her letters, not yet, but every word carried its weight. One afternoon, a storm rolled in, the kind that turned the sky black and made the air smell like iron. They rushed to bring the horses in, working side by side as lightning tore the sky open. At one point, a spooked mare broke loose, rearing near the fence. Cole moved first, his strength and calm saving both the animal and Anna from harm. When it was over, rain poured down in heavy sheets, drenching them both. She looked at him, soaked, breathless, laughing despite the danger, and realized that love wasn't always gentle. Sometimes it was wild, like the storm that had nearly swallowed them. Sometimes it was survival itself. When the rain eased, they stood under the porch roof, water dripping from their hair. Cole reached out, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "You know," he said softly, "the day you left, I thought the storms would never stop. But maybe they were just waiting for you to come back." Anna smiled, her fingers tracing his jaw. "Maybe they were waiting for us to start again." Time passed, seasons turning with the slow grace of forgiveness. Samuel Hale came to visit once more, this time with Lily by his side. The old man watched the way Cole looked at his daughter, the respect in his eyes, the steadiness in his touch, and the last of his unease melted away. "You've changed, Turner," he said gruffly. Cole smiled. "So has she." Lily, older now, ran laughing through the fields, her hair flying like sunlight. Anna watched her, her heart full. "She reminds me of hope," she murmured. Cole took her hand. "No, she reminds me of you." Years would come and go. The ranch would see drought and harvest, loss and plenty. But through it all, Cole and Anna built something neither had known they needed, a home not made of debt or guilt, but of forgiveness and choice. Sometimes, at dusk, they would sit on that same porch where it all began. He'd hold her hand as the sun slipped low, and she'd rest her head on his shoulder, there. Silence, speaking the language they'd spent years learning. Once, as the wind carried the scent of rain across the fields, Anna whispered, "You remember the day you came to take my father's debt?" Cole's lips brushed her hair. "How could I forget?" She smiled faintly. You didn't take his debt that day. You took my heart instead. He looked down at her, his eyes soft and certain. And you gave it freely, in the end. The horizon burned gold, the last light kissing the land that had seen their pain, their mistakes, and their redemption. Cole Turner tightened his arm around the woman beside him, knowing that every road, every storm, every wrong turn had led him here. To this moment, to her, to the quiet truth that love, once found, was the only debt worth owing. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred, the kind that comes when two souls have found their way back from the edges of ruin. The land was alive again, golden fields whispering with the promise of harvest. The scent of cedar and earth filled the air each morning, and every evening, the sky burned in shades of crimson that melted into indigo. Anna stood on the porch most nights, her hands resting on the rail, watching the horizon stretch endlessly before her, and it felt, at last, like home. Cole would join her there after tending to the cattle, his shirt clinging to his broad frame, his face shadowed and sun-worn. Sometimes he would say nothing at all, just stand beside her, their silence a shared language. Other times, he'd tell her about the years before she came, the years he spent trying to fill the void she'd unknowingly left behind. She would listen, her eyes soft, her heart heavy for the man who had carried so much sorrow in the quiet of his own chest. One evening, she turned to him and said, "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to my father's door that day?" He smiled faintly. "Every damn day, and I think I'd still be writing," he said, his voice rough. "Looking for something I couldn't name. Maybe looking for you." Anna's lips curved in that slow, knowing way that made him feel young again, alive again. "You would have found me," she said softly. "Maybe not that day, but someday." He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently, as if grounding himself in the truth of her words. "You still believe things happen for a reason." She turned her face toward the horizon where the last light dipped below the hills. "I believe pain does. It leads us where we need to be, even if it breaks us first." They stood like that for a long while, the prairie wind brushing through their hair, until the stars took the sky. The next morning brought new life to the ranch. Lily, now a young woman of 16, had come to spend the summer with them. She'd grown into her mother's eyes and her sister's stubbornness, and the house echoed again with laughter. Anna watched her ride through the fields, hair streaming behind her like fire, and she felt something deep and fierce bloom inside her. "Hope. Reminds me of you," Cole said one afternoon as they leaned against the fence, watching Lily break a new colt. Anna smiled. "She's braver than I ever was." "Not true," he said quietly. "You were brave the day you walked out of your father's house. You were brave every day after that." She looked at him, and the memory of that first ride, of dust, silence, and fear, flickered behind her eyes. "I was terrified, and you came anyway," he said. "That's what courage looks like." The summer stretched warm and full of color. The ranch prospered in ways Cole hadn't dared to hope for. The drought that had once threatened to ruin everything had passed, and the earth had forgiven him. He'd forgiven himself, too, in small, quiet ways. Each sunrise was a promise kept. Each night beside Anna was a reminder that redemption wasn't a dream, it was something you built, one choice at a time. But as with all good things, the peace they found carried a shadow, distant but waiting. It came in the form of a letter, delivered one dusty afternoon by a rider from town. Cole broke the seal at the kitchen table while Anna kneaded bread beside him. The words on the page were sharp and heavy. A land dispute had begun at the county line, men claiming parts of the Turner Ranch that had been his since his father's time. The law was thin out here, and greed was thick. "What is it?" Anna asked, wiping flour from her hands. Cole's eyes hardened as he folded the letter. "Trouble," he said simply. 2 days later, he rode out to meet the men who claimed his land. Anna wanted to go with him, but he refused gently, promising he'd be back by nightfall. She watched him ride away, his figure small against the horizon, and that old ache, the one she thought she'd buried years ago, rose again in her chest. The sun slipped low, and still, he didn't return. The hours crawled by. Lily tried to distract her with talk, but Anna couldn't focus. By the time the moon rose, a storm had gathered on the plains, black and restless. She paced the porch, her heart hammering against her ribs, until at last, she saw a lantern flickering in the distance. Cole's horse limped into view, mud splattering its sides. Cole himself was slumped in the saddle, his shirt torn, blood staining his side. "Cole," Anna cried, rushing to him. Lily followed, her face pale. They half carried him into the house, laying him on the bed. His breath came shallow, his jaw clenched in pain. "They ambushed me," he managed between breaths. "Said the land was theirs. One of them had a rifle." Anna pressed her hands against the wound, tears streaking her face. "You shouldn't have gone alone. I've fought worse," he muttered, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a graze." But it wasn't. The bullet had torn deep, and though the bleeding slowed under Anna's care, his skin grew pale, his strength slipping. The doctor from town wouldn't reach them until morning. She stayed by his side through the night, wiping his brow, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. Between the flicker of the oil lamp and the storm raging outside, the room felt suspended between life and death. At one point, Cole stirred, his hand finding hers. "Don't cry, Anna. Don't you dare tell me not to cry," she whispered fiercely. "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not after everything." He managed a weak smile. "You sound like you did the first day we met. Angry. Beautiful." "Don't," she said, shaking her head. "Don't talk like this. I need you to hear me," he said, his voice trembling. "If something happens to me." "Nothing will," she cut in. "Promise me you'll keep this land," he continued. "You and Lily. Promise me you'll fight for it. It's yours now. It's always been yours." Tears blurred her vision. "You're not dying, Cole. You're too stubborn for that." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But if I don't wake up tomorrow, know this. I never meant to take your freedom, Anna. I only ever wanted to give you mine." Her heart broke at the sound of his words. She leaned down and kissed him, her tears falling against his skin. "Then stay, and we'll build the rest of it together." By dawn, the rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean, and light spilled across the wooden floor. Cole's breathing steadied, slow but strong. He lived. The doctor arrived later that morning, stitching the wound and assuring Anna he'd recover with time. For days she barely left his side. Lily took over the ranch work, proving she'd learned well under Cole's guidance. When at last he woke fully, color returning to his cheeks, the first thing he saw was Anna sleeping beside him, her hand still holding his. He smiled weakly, whispering her name. She stirred, her eyes blinking open, relief flooding her face. "You came back," she breathed. "I told you I would," he rasped. "Didn't I?" She nodded, laughter and tears mingling as she pressed her forehead against his. "You always keep your word, Cole Turner." Weeks passed before he could ride again, but the day he did, the whole ranch seemed to breathe easier. Life returned to its rhythm. Yet something had changed between them, something deeper, born not just from love but from survival. They had seen the edge of loss and turned back together. As summer waned into autumn, they decided to make it official. Samuel Hale returned, older, slower, but proud beyond words. The ceremony was simple. Just family, a few close friends, and the land that had carried their story from beginning to end. Anna wore a dress the color of sunrise, and Cole, standing tall despite his lingering limp, couldn't take his eyes off her. When the preacher asked if he would take her hand, Cole's voice didn't falter. "I already did," he said, "and I'll never let go." The laughter that followed was soft and warm. Anna's heart swelled as she looked at the man who had once been her captor, then her savior, and now her husband. She thought of all the pain, the fear, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, and how all of it had led here, to this quiet, perfect moment beneath the wide, forgiving sky. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and the guests drifted away, Cole took her hand and led her to the hill that overlooked the fields. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of wheat and dust. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, his voice low. She smiled. "Every day. I used to think I'd spend my life fighting for land, for respect. But now," he looked at her, eyes soft. "Now I know I was meant to fight for you." She touched his face, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to fight, Cole. You just had to find me." He kissed her then. Slow, deep, endless. And when they broke apart, the sky had turned gold again, the same gold that had watched them from the beginning. Years passed. The ranch thrived. Lily married a kind man from town and started her own family nearby. Samuel passed quietly one winter night, his last words a prayer of thanks for his daughter's happiness. Anna buried him under the oak tree by the creek, where the wildflowers grew thick and bright come spring. Cole grew older, his hair streaked with silver, his hands still strong from the work that never truly ended. But no matter how many years went by, he never stopped looking at Anna the way he did that first day she rode back into his life, with awe, gratitude, and love fierce enough to outlast time itself. One evening, decades later, as the sun set low over the fields, Cole sat on the porch with Anna beside him, their fingers intertwined. The sky burned in shades of red and gold, the same colors that had painted every beginning and every ending of their story. "You ever think about the past?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Every now and then, but it doesn't haunt me anymore. It brought me here." Anna nodded, her head resting against his shoulder. "You kept your promise, you know. You never tried to own me again." He chuckled quietly. "You never would have let me." She laughed softly, the sound carrying across the fields. "No, I wouldn't." They sat there until the stars appeared, the night wrapping around them like a memory. Cole turned to her, his voice a whisper. "Anna, yes, if I had to do it all again, every mistake, every mile, every scar, I'd still come to that door. I'd still take your hand." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "And I'd still say yes." He smiled, his fingers tightening around hers. "Then I reckon we did all right." The wind stirred the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied softly. The land, the sky, the world itself seemed to hold them in a moment outside of time. And when the night deepened, and the stars turned brighter than they'd ever been, it felt as though the prairie finally whispered back to them the same words it had held since the day they met. "Love, once found, is the only debt worth owing." Thank you so much for watching this story till the very end. Your support means more than words can ever say. If you felt the depth of this journey, don't forget to give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Together, we'll keep bringing powerful stories to life, and your presence here makes all the difference.